Secret Circle.
Welcome to The Secret Circle with me, Luke Decker, the podcast where I chat with authors, filmmakers, musicians, and more about the art of their craft and let you in on some of their secrets. Today's guest is crime fiction author David Fennell. His works include the D.I. Archer novels, The Art of Death, See No Evil, and most recently, The Silent Man. I'm really happy to welcome David to the show. Welcome.
Thanks, Luke. Good to see you.
You too.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Where are you coming to me from? Is this London or Brighton?
London. Yeah, we're in our flat in London.
Wonderful. And I'm coming to you from the charming town of St. Albans.
Oh, nice.
Yes. So I'm excited to have a chat with you about writing, about The Silent Man, about your process, about serial killers, all that kind of stuff. So let's kick off with the first question, which is more of maybe a philosophical question, but I'm wondering, and I like to ask this of any writer, whether it's a novelist or a screenwriter. The question I have is why do you specifically write?
That's a very good question. Because I have a compulsion to do so, and there's this need in me to write that has always been there since I was a child. And I tell the story quite a lot. I'm sure people are bored hearing it. Growing up in Northern Ireland, in Belfast during the Troubles, it's when the world is turning to shit around you. Am I allowed to swear?
Yes, you can swear. I'm trying to say the F word, but other words are fine.
I won't use that word. It's you try and make sense of everything that's going around you, and as someone who as a kid was like an avid reader, I would read books and I think, oh, I wish I could do that. That was just wonderful. And then I just started just writing in secret, as I think we all do, and it became clear to me that there was kind of more, that this writing thing was so therapeutic. I don't find it therapeutic these days, I have to say, but at the time as a kid, I did, because it made sense of everything around me. Now it's torture. But it's something I have to do, it's something, and I love to do, and it's a privilege. Although I find it really screws me up sometimes.
So I'm interested. In what way? So you kind of as a kid it was therapeutic. Now it's a bit more taxing because it's your profession. It's the day job, and whatever your day job is, no matter how much you love it, I feel like there's always a sense of a struggle with it. Like you can love it, but sometimes you just don't want to do it because it's easier to watch Netflix. But what are the struggles that you have with writing now, and why do you think you have them?
I think certainly the book that I'm writing currently, which is the follow-up to The Silent Man and the next in the Archer series. The big struggles I've had is discipline this year, and there's been a few things happened in my personal life in terms of my father passed away and an aunt passed away and so on. There's been lots of kind of crap going on.
Yeah,
and that's kind of thrown me off the rails in terms of moving forward to this book, and it's. Those kind of things, those personal things, can really get in the way, and kind of screw you up a little. And and they have a lasting effect.
Yeah.
That even though it's many months down the line now, it's the knock-on effect of those losses is still there. But generally, to answer your question, generally, what was the question again?
Oh my God! I had to stop and think about it for myself for a second. I was like, what did I ask? I was just enjoying the tangent. No, what are the difficulties now that you feel like you have sometimes?
I think, and I think difficulties in general. When people are not dying,
Yeah.
is,
It's always a positive.
it is. I get distracted very easily,
Yeah.
and I can get onto doing something else that um, like I might have an idea for a screenplay, so I might just, oh my god, I'm so excited about that, so I'll go and start working on that.
Yeah.
And then like 4 weeks later, I'm like behind on my book. So
Yeah. Do you ever feel like the you obviously don't need to go into detail with certain
mhm.
things, but do you ever feel like sometimes like the personal dramas that you're going through, while they can definitely deter you from writing, do you ever feel like they can be channeled and help your writing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you've got so much emotion going on in your life, you can channel all that into what you're writing.
Yeah.
And certainly in the Silent Man, like or in the Archer books, the grandfather of the main character who has got dementia,
Yeah.
that's basically based on my father. So everything that's happened to him has happened to my dad.
Yeah.
And so that was a kind of way of kind of getting, you know, um, I guess stealing his stories, but also,
Yeah.
understanding it and coming to terms with it, and and also, I guess there's a kind of plagiarizing of real life situations, but
Yeah.
also, I did get a lot out of writing those, and and, and yeah. So they kind of fed into those real life things do feed in, but also generally sort of emotions absolutely will feed
Mm,
into your writing.
yeah. Yeah. So let's go back to young David before you were a writer. When did you decide? Like when you got that writing bug when you were a kid and you were using it for therapeutic reasons. When did you start to think that maybe this is something you'd want to do professionally?
It never occurred to me until much later in life.
Mm,
So I went to. I mean, I became a professional writer. That writing has always been my job in some capacity. So
mm,
whether it's a copywriter, a web writer, or technical writer, there's always been some sort of writing of words because that's the direction I always wanted to go in. I always wanted to go in the direction of being a novelist,
mm,
but the next best thing was to I didn't get paid, pretty well, was to follow those routes,
yeah.
and I ended up working with a lot of journalists and people who were poets and also aspiring novelists go into writing, like technical writing jobs, for example, or copywriting jobs, because it's all you're always writing stories. If you're
Mm,
writing something about maybe a piece of software or whatever to make someone else understand it, it's a kind of story. There's a
mm,
beginning, a middle, and an end, effectively.
yeah.
So, um, so in terms of becoming a full-time novelist, so I started writing novels, I think, in my mid 30s, and I thought this has always been my ambition, and I just kind of fell away from it.
Mm,
And then came back a few years later. It's always been in the back of my mind, that this is my ambition. But life gets in the way. You have a mortgage to pay, you've got bills to pay, and stuff like that. So that kind of takes priority,
yeah.
as it does for all of us. And then when I got into my 40s, it became a reality. Then I ended up doing a few courses, and then I did a master's in creative writing.
Mm,
Um, had that opportunity, which I really love doing, actually.
yeah. Where did you do
Um,
that at? If you don't mind telling the world.
no, I did it. It was with affiliated with Sussex University, but I did it actually in Chichester
Oh,
um,
cool.
at Westdean College, which is like Hogwarts for adults. It's a beautiful building,
Yeah.
and it's like a massive mansion house, which is dedicated to the arts and crafts.
Oh, that's awesome.
And yeah, it was really incredible.
What was the thing that you, or maybe a couple of things that you took away from your MA? Because I think something that always interests me is I've done my MA in creative writing. I'm finishing a PhD in creative writing. I think academic pursuits of of the arts is important. And I think people, if they want to do that, should be able to do that. But we kind of have a government who don't agree. They want to wipe out the arts more or less until there's another pandemic and we have nothing else to do. And then they want it all for free. Um, but I'm curious, like for you, what was, what was one of the benefits and one of the one of those key things that you learned and took away that you still employ with your writing now?
I think it gave me the confidence to write,
Mm,
and um, it gave me the confidence to write, and it put me in a position with my peers, so people
yeah,
like me, and who wanted to write and who aspired to write, and um, and being in a room with like-minded people with the same ambitions was really liberating. It was
yeah,
incredible, and for me, that was a big takeaway
yeah.
for that. The creative writing masters, and I'm sure you found this also, that it will not make you a writer.
No.
It's an academic study. I really believe you're either a writer or you're not. It's in your
Yeah,
DNA or
yeah,
it's not. But you can study it and enjoy it, and and have a great time, which is what we did. And there's a lot of people did. Went through the couple of years that it was running at Westdean, but I think there's only 2 or 3 of us that are now published authors and
yeah.
full time out of like more than 50 people. I
That
think
doesn't
over
surprise
the
me.
few years, yeah.
I
Uh,
remember on the first day of my MA, there the teacher said to the class, um, most of you will stop writing when you finish this degree. You won't write again after this. And I was like, how can that be possible? And I really don't know what most of that cohort is up to, but I can only think of one person who I still know that I know is a poet, and she's still publishing and she's writing and all that kind of stuff. But other than that, yeah, it's interesting that did you find it did you, when you were doing your MA, did you find that there were people there who you were sort of wondering, why are you here?
yes.
Yeah. How does
Yeah.
that? Did you have like workshops and stuff? Or would you bring in work and like
Mm.
talk about it with the class and stuff like that?
Yeah, we would all have to read our workout, and that's part of writing. This is,
Yes.
you're bearing your soul, so
Yes.
everyone has to submit their work for us all to read and us all to judge, and
Yes.
that's still the case when you're a full-time writer, any type of
Oh
writer.
yes. But
So,
I'm
and
go on, go on.
yeah, so there's a few people that just couldn't write for toffee,
Yes.
and and that made me sad. You know?
Yes.
It's like, it's a fact, and
Yeah.
that's the world. The creative writing MAs do not create writers. You're not, and this it kind of makes me cross. And I think about like, what no, MAs don't make me cross. I think they're wonderful, and I think we should be pursuing them.
Yeah.
But when I see people like publishing houses and agencies charging courses for like £1,500,
Yeah.
and and saying, come and we will make you writer.
Yeah.
It's yeah. Unless you've got some sort of academic qualification at the end of it, I don't think you should be pursuing anything that costs you so much money. That's what makes me cross. But
Yeah.
um, yeah,
I definitely agree with that. It's tricky, even even on an academic side. University. I think anyone who wants to study should be able to study, but I think there's an asterisk on the end of that, and that is, I think you do need to demonstrate the skill, particularly for an MA. Undergrad, that's where you're learning, and but if for the further degrees, because that was something I remember a lot of people, when we got our first round of grades. There was a good chunk of people who got some C's and some D's, and they were just, their jaws were on the floor, and they were like, "What? I thought I was meant to be a good writer. Why would they these markings, this feedback tells me I'm terrible. And there is this part where like some of them I think just didn't work hard enough on their stories, but I think there were other people who it's like I think maybe the university might have done you a disservice by letting you in.
Yeah,
And I know that sounds really mean, and that's not meant to be like exclusionary or anything like that. But I do think in terms of, universities are starved for money, and they'll take it however they can get, and I think that has possibly a negative impact on education in general, but definitely in the creative sphere for sure.
yeah, yeah.
What do you think in your writing career? What was the hardest thing that you had to overcome to become professional full time writer, other than sales?
Yeah. I think finishing projects is still remains the most difficult thing um, to do. When I say projects, I mean a book. And
Yeah.
um, the like I said earlier, the current novel I'm writing on is one I'm really struggling to complete, and it's
Mm.
and I'll tell you a bit more about that when we go into process later. What I've done to
Yes.
overcome that. So, but I think some of the most difficult things. Um, I think finishing a project is
Mm.
certainly, and I
Yeah.
to me like I like I said earlier, like writing a book it can be torture, and it's because it's such hard work.
Yeah.
And I kind of look at it like someone building a bust, the sculpture of a bust, because when you're doing the first draft, it's just a big blob of ugliness,
Yeah.
you know. And then I will do so. I'll always have an idea of what the book is about, beginning, middle, and end. I might even write a log line so that I have it sort of in my head, what it's the essence of it essentially.
Mm.
And then I'll do the first draft, I'll plod my way through that, and I'll have this like thumbprints and like
Yeah.
Quasimodo type
Yeah.
thing.
Nose hanging down.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes it falls
And
off.
indeed, and it's all falling apart. But then it's a case of you just kind of molding it. Then, so I'll put a
Yeah.
layer of um, a layer of. Well, I'll come to the layers in a minute, but I will just smooth it
Yeah.
so that I have all the thumbprints and everything is gone
Yeah.
or gone. And then I'll put a layer of emotion on,
Mm.
and then another layer of emotion, maybe then and it's at the end of the day, it's all about emotion. It has to be about emotion for things to be, for the reader to care, and for your story to go in the direction it
Yeah.
needs to go. So that's what I kind of liken it to. It's like creating a bust and making it beautiful or
Yes.
acceptable.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I think that's a good analogy. The other thing that you brought up is the difficulty of writing a novel. And I think a lot of people, who aren't writers, they don't really understand the difficulty of the time and the research and the brain work that goes into this. I don't know what are your opinions on just on that aspect, and sometimes a kind of flippant response sometimes people give, especially when they're like, "Oh, I got this really great idea that I think you could write," and you're just like,
Yeah, a lot of people say, "Oh, I've got a book in me." But I can't remember who was it that said, maybe it should stay there. Um, some comedian or actor or something like that. But I think seriously though, I think a lot of people say that flippantly, but I think it's because they don't really understand
yeah,
the amount of work that goes into
yeah,
putting a book together, because it's all consuming.
yeah,
And there are probably very few writers who it's not all consuming, but for me it's all consuming.
yes, yeah,
And yeah, and it kind of it overtakes everything in your life pretty much, and every waking hour sometimes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was also thinking about recently there was the big writer's strike in the States, and there was so much back and forth on social media about that whole process, because there were people who were very much like, oh my God, why do these people want to get paid more money? Like, how hard can it be? Or, oh my gosh, these TV shows are terrible anyway. Why do they want more money? Um, and there was a part of me that's just like, you're really, when I saw those sorts of comments, I'm like, there's so much that you're missing, and not fully understanding. It's like, yeah, there are a lot of like dumb movies and dumb TV shows, but sometimes the dumbness isn't even the writer's fault. Blade Runner is probably a perfect example of that. All the stupid things in Blade Runner came from the stupid producers who wanted to do dumb things with the movie, and Ridley Scott's like, no. And then eventually, Ridley Scott got his film out the way he wanted, and Blade Runner is a cult classic now. And there's so much, yeah, people don't really understand, but it's like, we're not only are we breaking our backs for these stories, but like we also then have to deal with, whether if you're TV or film, these producers or editors who maybe don't fully get it, and you have to sort of push and fight with that. Yeah, so it's interesting to me. Let's chat more about crime fiction, though. What do you think? And this is more philosophical again. What do you think makes crime fiction so appealing to us? I mean, it's one of the biggest genres out there, if not the biggest.
Yeah. Um, People are obsessed with crime, aren't they?
Mm,
And I think we all are. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. The shows that I love to watch on television are generally all crime related,
yeah,
you know, or thrillers.
yeah,
And so, and I think, I mean, personally, I think we all want some sort of resolution. We all want there's so much going on in the world right now, especially, but in general, and all of us have crap to deal with in our lives always. And some
yeah,
people even have been victims of crime, or know people have been victims of crime. And we see all the stuff on the news all the time. And what we get from, I think, crime fiction, well, it's entertainment.
mm,
Really, it is. But also we get, even in the darkest thrillers, for the most part, we get closure.
mm,
And where the bad guy is sent away, and the people don't get away with crimes for the most part, not always, but
yeah, yeah.
for the most part, and that can be um, very satisfying for people.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I agree with that. How important for you is location when it comes to writing? Because your stuff is set in London. What I love the London setting. I like big city settings in general. But how important is not just location, but a particular location? Like, why London, not Manchester, or I don't know, Warrington? I'm sure there's lots of crime in Warrington.
Yeah. um, That's a good question. I think London. When I started writing these books, I wanted, I wanted to feature the London as I saw it, and
Mm,
and where I live now, which is in this theatre land, effectively.
yeah,
We're right in the centre, and walking around these streets, you can see such great beauty, like and architecture dating back centuries,
yeah,
and also like dating back decades,
yeah.
and very recent as well. And it's a quite an extraordinary backdrop.
Mm,
When you could be seeing something from medieval times, and then in the next minute you'll see this great big shiny pointy shard.
yeah.
And so I love that about London.
Mm,
But also, there's a lot of decay here. I mean, an architectural decay, which is, I think, is just visually appealing on the page. And
mm,
certainly with my first book, The Art of Death, or the first in this series, it's all of the locations in The Art of Death are real locations,
mm,
of, like, for example, there's these mansion houses in Ealing, for example, which is very, very creepy, and just stunningly macabre in that way,
Mm,
and that was to me a perfect place to have my serial killer, who was an artist,
yeah.
do one of his installations of dead bodies.
Yeah. I love it. How with location? How do you? I mean, it feels like a character almost. And how do you go about trying to bring that character to life? Bring London to life.
Uh, I don't know. I don't consciously do it. I think
Mm,
what I do is just um, I describe it as I see it, and how I want it to feel.
yeah.
I In my books I try to treat uh, London as almost a Gotham kind of
Mm,
city. And it's kind of fraught. It's kind of My books are very fast paced. They're you
mm,
know they're you know um, they're just on the move
yeah.
constantly. And I wanted to depict London as just like that, like a frenetic, um, mad city.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you nailed it. It's true. You're. I mean, when I was reading the Silent Man, I mean, it opens up with what Archer. She's on out for a run, and then just from that moment onwards, it's
Yeah,
just shit happening like and it was very it's very fun. I love and I really prefer fast paced reads. I don't like it when there's a lot of kind of dilly dallying or there's a certain author who we won't name who writes books that are 1,000 pages for some reason, and there's just so much in them that could be cut out.
mhm,
Because it's just meandering. Whereas what I really enjoyed about the Silent Man was just how quickly things were moving. Plot was moving, but it was exciting, and even in what I would say kind of tender moments, there was good moments. It was good pace rather. Like the first scene, particularly with Archer and her dad. Which I won't go into any detail because everyone just needs to go buy the Silent Man and read it or listen to the audiobook. But like even in those moments, you're like, oh, good, this is moving at such a good pace. There's so much intrigue on every page, which is hard to do. It's really hard to do because there are so many writers who just put so much. There's so much gunk that gets left on the page sometimes, even when it's the finished product. It's like, yeah, this could have gone with maybe 2 or 3 more rounds of edits, maybe. Um, but it is very hard to do. But kind of on the topic of characters, we briefly kind of mentioned this in the how much of you yourself goes into the story. You mentioned that you kind of plagiarized your dad's story, but in some ways it is your story too because you are a part of that narrative. Um, and you have your experiences with that. But I'm curious, not necessarily maybe not that what we've already talked about, but in terms of other elements of you, how when you're creating characters, um, do you find that you're putting various elements of you personally in it, or your friends, or is it like a subconscious thing? Like, tell me about your creation process when it comes to character creation.
um, yeah, good question. I think um, so. The two main characters in the Archer books are obviously Grace Archer and her DS
Mm,
Harry Quinn. And Grace Archer, she comes. Um, I was going to say baggage, but she doesn't have baggage. She's had a traumatic childhood, and so that's left her with a bit of PTSD,
hmm
and that kind of, um, although not so much in the third book, but in the first and second book, we see a lot of that she's dealing with, especially after a near miss with a killer in The Art of Death.
Yeah.
That kind of brings all that back. So that kind of informs who she is, and informs her choices, and and how she deals with certain crimes and certain people.
Mm,
And obviously, with that comes a certain amount of emotion, um, and and but the trick for me here, the difficulty, and I think probably all writers will find, is that yeah, you know those people they or she will have all that trauma behind her, but you have to be really cautious to not make that really boring
Yeah.
for the reader,
Yeah.
and not milk it. And because you want a bit of humor and a bit of fun, and you don't want to be relating to someone who's like miserable, and she's not.
Yeah. No, 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 she's
She
not.
deals with. She's learned to cope. She's a strong person,
Yeah.
and of course, by her side is her like, who's become her best mate is Harry Quinn, and
Yeah.
I would say he's probably the most like me out of everyone
Mm.
or anyone in the books, and not he's not really like me, but although people, my friends say he is, he's quite dry,
Mm.
and he's he kind of doesn't suffer fools, and and he kind of adds that kind of element to it, and I think that's probably a bit more me.
Mm.
When I write him, I'm kind of I suppose writing myself in a way, which is probably a
Mm.
bit indulgent, but I find it quite useful.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would I say in this situation? Yeah.
I mean, I think really in all of our works, there's going to be a character, maybe not necessarily the lead character, but a character, and it could be the lead that does sort of feel like it is a version of us a little bit. I think that's hard not to do. I think and I think there's other people who write characters that are bigger than life, that I think it's how they wish that they were seen or would like to be seen, or some sort of wish fulfillment of how they would like to be this type of person. Thinking of, like, I don't know, Jack Reacher. I feel like Lee Child. That's his. He would like to be
Yes,
Jack
you would
Reacher, and
like to
there.
be that.
Yeah.
I
Um,
think that's the case for all writers. I think
mm,
if they were honest,
yeah.
in nearly all of your characters, there's a bit of you in there,
Yes.
but not you're not maybe not conscious of putting a little bit of piece of you into that particular character, but
Mm,
there has to be, if you for a character to be kind of authentic.
yeah.
Um, I don't like to use that expression, but I guess it's the only one that comes to mind. To be authentic.
Oh, be your
Uh,
authentic self, as if you could possibly be an
I
inauthentic.
know exactly. But for them to be authentic, I
Mhm.
think that has to you have to draw on something that maybe you have felt.
Yes.
Um, and I someone one writer many years ago, before I started the Archer series, a very famous crime writer,
Mm.
asked me what I was working on, and I said, well, I'm writing a female detective. She went, "What makes you think you can write from a female perspective?"
Oh, interesting. I was going to ask you about this. Okay. Okay. Here we go.
Yeah, and I kind of floored me,
Yeah.
especially coming from a fellow writer,
Mm.
and and I didn't say anything. I said, "Well, I fumbled out some ridiculous response." But then,
Mhm.
like, I didn't sleep that night. I don't
Yeah.
think. I was just thinking about, oh, God, why didn't I say something? Because of course, uh, for me. It's like, if you want to take that approach of why can't I write a female character, then why can you, for example, write a male character?
Yes.
It's like, this is, every, I am, I'm writing genre fiction, and I'm not writing literary fiction. So I'm not
Mm.
writing the female experience. I'm
Mm.
writing a character who's goes through certain emotions, and her emotions are universal.
Yes.
And it's how she reacts to certain things is are the kind of emotions that we generic emotions that we all go through, and
Yeah.
so
But even if you take it outside of your protagonist, I mean, the logic behind this kind of way of thinking, and I remember it was really really picking up momentum during my MA, and I remember, interestingly enough, there were female writers in that group who, anytime, you know one of the male writers were, presenting something that had a female in the story, there was all this, like, oh well, you're describing this person in an inappropriate way, or a woman wouldn't act like that, or why is she having this emotion? And but then, yeah, and then I remember one specific time, this one of the female authors brought in right, and brought in this work that was one of the most, like, sexist pieces I've ever like listened to. It was like, they talk about the male gaze. This was like female gaze on overdrive. Like everything was just actually it was just, I mean, I don't know. The characters were lesbians, and the way that she was describing was like worse than some of the sleaziest like hard-boiled fiction out there that's like really like lining every curve. But like no one called them out, so it's interesting to me. But then at the same time, like I said, with your supporting characters, like what does that mean if you can't write, if you're only meant to write what is you? A, that's boring. But B, like, well, then where does that stop? Like, how can you have anything else in your story other than just a almost Mr. Smith army of clones that are just
Yeah.
you interacting with yourselves?
Yeah, and it was a ridiculous thing to say, and I don't think, and I've discussed it with many writer friends and people in
Yeah.
publishing. Of course, it's
Yeah.
and everyone thinks the same.
Yeah.
And cultural appropriation is a different thing altogether. But
True.
it's, I think, and of course, literary fiction. If you're going to write, well, I don't know. I mean, some people. Some writers writing literary stuff have written some really male writers have written some amazing female characters. So it's
yes, and vice versa,
Yeah,
I think I can't remember who it was. I was talking with Anna Mazzola, and she mentioned, I can't remember who she was quoting, but like they were on the topic of sensitivity reads, and I was like, I hate that term in general. But she said, well, this other individual calls them authenticity reads, and that makes more sense. And kind of where I'm going with that is, that's all about research, because no two people are going to have the same experience. So you could have a book that has a protagonist that is not your race, not your gender, and you could let two people of that other race or gender read it, and the feedback you're going to get isn't going to be the exact same. But there is something in making sure that you're doing a wide range of research to make sure that what you're writing is, that favorite word of yours, authentic. Because that's what people look for. They if it feels authentic, and not pandery or demeaning, then you're gonna win your readers over.
and it's an interesting discussion, and we probably don't have time to do it all today. But I've seen on TikTok, I've seen some readers slate authors for the way they treat certain
interesting.
Genders and races in their books.
Wow.
And Stephen King is one, and I've read a lot of Stephen King. I love Stephen King, and it's he is not sexist and he is not racist. He just isn't. But the characters in his book can be, and I don't know if you've read Holly. I've read Holly, which is really tremendous, and some of the stuff that's in that book is just, some of the characters in that book are just shocking.
Yes.
And some of the things they say, but that is the world we live in, and you have to have you have to be honest, and you have to expose this stuff in books, and when you read that stuff, you realize it's not celebrating it. It's, of course, we know that, but we're saying this. It is condemning it, and it is, when you read it, it's a hard read, but that's the reality. But the fact that people, these idiot TikTokers, oh my God, he's racist, the way he treats people. It's just like, oh God.
Yeah, it drives me. That also drives me nuts. I the whole idea that, I remember once someone said to me, this was again during my MA, that's where I have all my fun stories from idiot readers. Is there was one individual who was like, well, could you like maybe put something in here that makes it clear that this isn't what like you think? I'm like, do you mean like the character? No, like you. Like, I'm like, the author. You want me to put a footnote or something in the story that makes it clear what is happening is not like condoned by me, the author. Like, nonsense. Absolute.
It relates. It also relates back to a point you were making earlier about television and film. And I was watching this again on my TikTok. All I do is just go on TikTok.
I had to delete TikTok. I had to delete it. It's off my phone.
I know. I've got to finish this book, and I've got to get rid of it. But I'm obsessed. With the movie world and
Mm.
all, and so it's like watching this guy talk about Mick Flanagan, who wrote many things, Midnight Mass, especially on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen Midnight Mass.
No, not yet.
It's kind of horror
Yeah.
thriller thing, and it's really fantastic. Like, and so it's about this character who, a man who's returning to his home after being spending. He was like a trader or something like
Mhm.
that. So had everything until he got drunk and killed someone. So he does his time in prison, then comes back to the island off the east coast of America, somewhere where he lives, and for redemption. And of course, so Mick Flanagan, who's like a brilliant filmmaker and writer and everything, the execs were saying, "Oh, well, you know, we want him looking for jobs. Can you just put something in about him? Just go to a job center or something like that." It was like, why? It's so irrelevant. You know, this guy has gone through the pain of, you know, what he. Anyway, it's basically wrestling with these execs to, you know, and then finding out that, for example, okay, well, I can do something, but it's gonna, you know, it's gonna need like a 3-second scene, which this means another location, which means the budget is going to go up, yeah, and then they cut it all, and that's you know, it's not as bad for writers. You know, we don't really have that. To that degree.
No.
TV world of science, which is mental, but it's you know, but yeah, in TikTok, you're judged harshly.
Yes, yeah, I'm all in favor for burning TikTok to the ground. Back to your writing process. When you're plotting your books, do you start with, is it the crime? Is it the theme? Is it something else? What's the thing that kind of kicks you off with your with like, say, Silent Man or you know, your first or second?
Yeah, so the Art of Death started off being a almost a cautionary tale about social media and dating apps and stuff like that, because I worked in cybersecurity for a long time and knew quite a bit about that. So I knew how easy it was to not just hack into people's Facebook accounts. You know, for example, most people, their passwords would be their dog's name and 123, or their pet's name and 123. That's the most common password.
Yeah.
And so it was a cautionary tale about, you know, lonely people on dating apps being catfished and being murdered. Then so, and I thought, oh God, well, it's a bit boring. So let's so then it, you know, it kind of evolved during the sort of thinking and writing process of being someone who fancies himself as an artist, like a Banksy character who then create sculptural stuff from their bodies, and that's how that formed. And See No Evil was kind of inspired by it's probably not my biggest seller because and which is fair enough, because I mean, who wants to read about eyes being cut from people's faces?
It's crime fiction, man. It's nasty stuff.
So that was inspired by so when I at 11 years old, I seen The Birds by Alfred Hitchcock, and I mean, I remember seeing that moment with the main character's mother goes to visit her friend in his cottage. I can't remember his name, and she's like walking through the house, and there's like feathers and cutlery lying everywhere. And he finds him in his bedroom, and we see his blood splattered pajama legs, and then she looks up, and then in his face the camera just jolts in, and then as you can see his eyes are like being eaten out. It's like, oh, it was like that horrified me, and it stuck with me forever. So I kind of like that inspired See No Evil, but basically a killer. It's a revenge book, but it's you know, and it's about a killer who you know, pumps them his victims full of ketamine, and then like uses a scalpel to take out their eyes while they're still living. But they're, you know, she has reason for doing it. He has reason for doing it. Sorry.
Yeah.
And it's not that you need, not that I'm saying you need a reason, but it's like it's and with the Silent Man, what was the inspiration for that? It's yeah, I could tell you the inspiration, but it would just give so much away.
Okay, don't do that. Don't do
It's
that. Yeah.
yeah, that's it's out of the three, that's the most difficult one to talk about
Mm,
because it's yeah, because that would just give too much away, and
yeah.
I think it's the one that surprised people the most.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, I'm not going to say anything. Just please buy it and read it because I'm like skint
We're
and
poor
enjoy it.
writers. Buy our books, please.
Yes, indeed. Buy his books too. His books.
All of our books.
Yeah.
So here's a question for you with crime fiction, because it's it's what we do. Do you sometimes think that the gimmick of the crime is oversold when the book is being marketed? Maybe, like, do you think that we maybe sometimes oversell the gimmick of the crime with stuff, or maybe not, and maybe we don't? But that's the question for you to answer.
You mean the actual crime that's committed or crimes that are committed in the story?
Yeah, it's like the whole everything
Yeah.
can be so focused around, like, oh, here's this crime, we're gonna really emphasize the crime, because for me, what I take away from most crime fiction stories, like, I can't remember hardly any plots from most books that I read, but I remember interesting character moments. So I can remember interesting moments like John Rebus or Raymond or Philip Marlowe or people like that.
Mhm.
Whereas, like, the plots will be like, I can't fully remember what totally happened in X, Y, and Z, but it's the character stuff and how they responded to things that that stuck with me, which made me think, maybe do we sometimes maybe oversell the crime, the horrific murder or things like that with some of our books, when actually the heart of the story is how our protagonists traverse that area, that narrative.
I think quite possibly. I think
Mm.
I sometimes feel I'm a victim of that too, in and that I'm kind of sold as a serial killer thriller writer, and in fact,
Right,
that's
yeah.
what I do. But my stories are more about the victims, and the
Yeah.
characters are not really about the killer.
Yeah.
Okay, they do some diabolical things, but it's more interesting to me as a writer to write about um, the cost, the
Mm,
human cost of crime,
yeah.
um, than it is to write something that is graphic, like the cutting out of eyes and stuff like that. I don't do a lot of that in See No Evil, by the way. There's not, so don't worry too much. If you go to buy it, it's a good story.
It's a good story.
I think.
um
So I think yeah, you're probably right. I mean, I get marketed as like Chris
mm,
Carter. I don't think I'm anything like, my books are nothing like Chris Carter's, but
right,
that's what
yeah.
I want to do, and I think it's probably helped some sales. But um, I think yeah, I think there's a focus on the crime sometimes, and I'm more interested in what emotions I can get from
Yeah.
readers, and that's more important to me.
Yeah.
It's more important to me when I read books. I want to be moved in some capacity. I want, even if it's like if I'm laughing or crying or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Kind of building off from the serial killer stuff. Let's talk serial killers. What do you think makes them? Because they are fascinating. I mean, in term, within fiction and reality, people are fascinated with this concept of serial killers. Um, what do you think makes them? Given that your books do focus on these types of murders, what makes them so appealing as the antagonists or part of an antagonist for your narratives?
I think as a crime writer, for me, I like the fact that there's not just one murder,
Mm.
and because I don't think I want to write a book that is all
Mm.
about solving one murder and going
Yeah.
through all the procedural stuff and interviewing these people. I want
Yeah.
to, like I mentioned earlier, for example, I want to write from the human cost. or from the about the human cost. But of course, you could do that with one single murder and the impact that has to family,
Yeah, sure, sure,
friends, and
sure.
stuff like that. But I I want to entertain,
Yeah.
and I want you know I want page turning, and I want multiple murder.
Yeah. I just want all the murder possible.
Kill them all, and so like it sounds like I've just contradicted everything I've said about it. Like I'm just all about the human
It's all about the
cost.
humanity.
I
Murder,
kill every
murder, murder.
in order to achieve that, I have to kill everyone. And, but it's there is an appeal in serial killers, I suppose. Although I don't read serial killer novels myself, but
Interesting.
it's although I love Thomas Harris. I mean, I've read
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say.
every single one of his books, and
Yeah.
and I love the movie. Well, certainly Silence of the Lambs.
Yes. Yes. I
It's
mean, I quite like serial killer stories. I think they're interesting and can be entertaining and fun, in a macabre way. I'm a big fan of Hannibal. I like the show. I like the Robert's books. I love Dexter. Those are some of my favorite books and TV show. I love them. So there's definitely something to them. I suppose. What do you'd think of, like, some of your stuff, even though obviously your protagonist is not the serial killer, unlike those other those other two books, unless book 4 takes a very dark twist for you, and Archer becomes a serial killer. Probably not. But what do you think the serial killer stories do to sort of, I don't know, tell some sort of story about, us as in the reader? Like, what are they meant to kind of tell us about humanity, rather, or do they?
I think they do. I think we're obsessed with them because we all, when we were young, we all had the monsters under the bed, or we all had
Mm,
monsters on the screen that terrified us. But now,
yeah.
sounds almost a cliche, but the monsters are real people, people that
Yeah.
might live on our streets, or people we might work with. And I think that element adds a certain sinister appeal that
Mm,
frightens us, but at the same time intrigues us.
yeah. Yeah. I agree. This is a silly question, and we'll wrap up here in a second. But I'm curious, between a couple of big names, the fictional serial killers, right? If you had to pit Hannibal against Dexter, who would win?
Hannibal.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
But Dexter's so clever.
So is Hannibal.
I know. Or would they destroy themselves?
I don't think Dexter would stand a chance.
Really? Maybe not. Maybe not. Hannibal is pretty gross.
Why do you? Are you?
Well,
do
I
you-
just Dexter seems so
younger.
younger and
Youth
cunning
on
and
the side.
clever that it's like, I feel like he has a bit of an edge to him that Hannibal doesn't. Not that Hannibal isn't edgy. Hannibal is very, very edgy. But there's just something that I'm like, I feel like Dexter might win in this fight. But it's like a Freddy versus Jason scenario here, isn't it? Like, who would win in a
Yeah.
fight? Yeah. David, this was a lot of fun. I enjoyed chatting with you today. Everyone needs to go pick up The Silent Man with its sprayed edges if you can find them. Where can you? I'm assuming Goldsboro Books has these.
Yes, so that's the
Maybe?
Goldsboro
Yes.
Books edition, which is in goldsborobooks.com.
Yes.
If the shop is in Cecil Court in London, if you're in London, or there's one in Brighton.
Yes.
Otherwise, you can order it online.
Yes.
So
Go pick it up. It's a terrific read. You're going to be entertained and enthralled. And as M.W. Craven says, it's a fantastic new series. He says it right on the front cover.
does.
But
Can
yeah,
can I just add, you can get it on Amazon. You can get it in all bookshops.
Oh, yes.
So not just Goldsboro. It's available
Yes.
everywhere.
Yes, anywhere you buy your books, you can get it. But if you want these really cool sprayed edges,
Yeah.
for those who are listening on Spotify, you'll have to go to YouTube and see what I'm talking about. But they're wonderful orange edges with theater masks going all the way around them. It's pretty awesome. But yeah, David, where can people find you on social media?
So I'm on pretty much everything, including TikTok.
including TikTok.
And although I've not posted anything in like 6 months, however,
probably the
people are
same.
still following me, which is kind of nice. But I'm on Twitter at DAVID FENNEL, and I'm also on Blue Sky now. And
Yes.
I can't remember. Oh, DAVID FENNEL, I think I'm just on there as, and Threads and Instagram and Facebook. And I also have my own website, which is I post blogs and stuff on there. I'm going to be doing a lot more of that. So that www.davidfennel.co.uk. So
Wonderful. And there will be links in all of the descriptions, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So go check out David's website, go check out his books, and we'll see you next time. David, this was a lot of fun. I'll hopefully have you back on in the future.
yeah, I look forward to it. Thank
Cool.
you. Thank you, Luke.
Alrighty. See you guys later.
The Secret Circle.